just ahead.
Going vegan is, according to scientists, the single biggest way that we can reduce our carbon footprint.
Veganuary has begun a month-long look at the impact of what we eat has on the world around us, with testimonials of a plant-based lifestyle.
Given everything that we know today about the animals we share our planet with, can we really justify killing them for a sandwich?
Scientists scramble to protect fragile ocean ecosystems. A new method freezes coral larvae to restore reefs.
This technology for coral reefs in the future is a real game changer.
But first,
I've never seen anything like this.
a winter nightmare for North Americans. Scores of people died during the Christmas holidays as temperatures dropped to as low as minus 45 degrees Celsius.
It may go down as one of the worst in history.
But is it climate related? The answer may surprise you. This is just 2 degrees on TRT World. I'm Reagan Des Vignes, welcome to the program. Well, a once-in-a-generation event and the worst storm in a lifetime, that's how the latest blizzard to hit North America has been described. It was so cold and there was so much snow in states like New York. Authorities found people frozen to death in the street. Sarah was following the story.
Winter has taken the U.S. by storm. Arctic weather conditions have brought on a nationwide deep freeze, taking scores of lives and affecting more than half of the population, according to officials.
It is painful to find members of your community that are deceased. Those that are deceased actually on streets in our community who were trying to walk out during storm conditions, got disoriented and passed away out in the street. To retrieve fatalities, people who passed away in cars, and to retrieve people who passed away in homes.
Storm-related deaths were also reported in Vermont, Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin, Kansas, and Colorado. The National Weather Service reports icy winds from the Arctic have driven the drop in temperatures, fueling a storm front that spread over most of the country and as far south as the Mexican border. Nearly 2 million homes and offices were left without power. New York has seen some of the worst of it, with the city of Buffalo blanketed under more than a meter of snow. The governor there called the storm an epic, once-in-a-lifetime weather disaster. Flight trackers showed the storm had also forced airlines to issue thousands of cancellations and many more delays ahead of the holiday season, stranding travelers and airline crews. Southwest Airlines reported it had to ground 60% of its scheduled flights.
Just about the time that we would get a runway clear in Denver and get airplanes de-iced and ready to go, that snow and ice was starting to impact St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, and it just snowballed all the way across the country. So we've been chasing our tails trying to catch up and get back to normal safely.
New York, Virginia, Kentucky, Georgia, North Carolina, and Oklahoma declared a state of emergency. In the West, Montana saw temperatures as low as negative 45 degrees Celsius. Whiteout blizzard conditions have dropped visibility to zero, with wind gusts of 115 kilometers in some areas, prompting a nationwide ban on personal road travel. But hundreds of motorists have called for rescue on roadways under a heavy blanket of snow. And some areas have been slammed with winter conditions unseen in 40 years. Sarah Balter, Just 2 Degrees.
Matthew Capucci is with us to help us understand exactly what happened in the atmosphere to result in such a powerful storm event. He's a meteorologist at Capital Weather Gang and joins me from Washington, D.C. Hi there, Matthew. So according to one climate report in the U.S., blizzard conditions for a straight 37.5 hours just does not happen. What about the storm was so unlike others in the past?
Yeah, so this was something called a bomb cyclone, essentially a pocket of low pressure over the Great Lakes that rapidly intensified. It had several different phases. For starters, as it was rapidly strengthening, sucking in air from all sides and vacuuming that air inwards, it tugged out a filament of frigid air from Canada on the backside with temperatures down to minus 40 degrees. So even after the storm pulled into Canada, then that cold air began blowing down Lake Erie, and that was key to what happened in Buffalo, because that cold air blew over relatively warmer lake waters, picked up moisture from the lake, and deposited that in the form of very heavy snow in Buffalo, New York. But here's the thing. Thanks to very strong air pressure contrast between Arctic high pressure to the west and the low pressure within that bomb cyclone, you got strong winds on the order of 100 to 110 kilometers per hour for an extended period of time. That reduced visibilities down to near zero for 12 hours in a row. Put that all together, you get 37 and a half hours of blizzard conditions. And honestly, to get a blizzard, you only have to have those conditions for 3 hours. So to see what they saw was like 12 times more severe than what you need to get a blizzard. And the results, unfortunately, spoke for themselves.
Yeah, no doubt it was a recipe for disaster. The Environmental Defense Fund in the U.S. said that between the years 1970 and 2017, winter in the mainland U.S. warmed more than 4.5 times faster per decade than over the past 100 years. Matthew, what are scientists in the U.S. saying about this last storm in December? Are they linking it to the climate crisis?
So interestingly enough, I actually don't see particularly strong links to climate change. So we can talk about it on the synoptic and the mesoscale level. Synoptic means a kind of a broad scale level. So let's talk about that first. So the big players, the setup to get this lake effect snow event was a low pressure system in Canada. That's the one that rapidly intensified the bomb cyclone. Now, over the course of a given year, you might have, say, 270 of these big, sprawling, low-pressure systems move across the United States. About 17, 18 would classify as bomb cyclones. The research suggests that because the poles are actually warming faster than the equator, there may be fewer of these large-scale storms every year. So that's why I say it's unlikely that there'd be a strong link between the big low pressure at the big levels and kind of what happened in sort of Buffalo and climate change. So I don't think there'd be a climate link there. Now let's talk about the local level. When we talk about the actual snows streaming off Lake Erie, thanks to that cold air blowing down the waters, we know two things that may be tied to climate change. Warmer waters and less ice over the lake would foster heavier snowfall. This time around, we saw water temperatures were very close to average, and ice cover was actually near or slightly above average. So those to me say that climate change was not playing a role here. Of course, it's unfortunate that the weather was the way it was, but this looks to be mainly a product of natural variability and not climate change.
Well, no doubt. I think generally scientists are saying that we are seeing much more intense weather events because of the changing climate. Matthew, how do you explain to someone, generally speaking, who says, but it's so cold, how can we be experiencing global warming? What do you say to someone like that?
That's a really good question. So I think one of the things that's challenging is that folks oftentimes have a very short memory. So you're right. They'll say like, hey, it's near record cold right now. Climate change must not be ongoing. I'd say two things. Number one, we were approaching records, but despite the magnitude of the cold air mass, we still didn't reach the records set back in 1989. So even though this probably should have gotten cold records, thanks to a baseline warning of climate change, we actually didn't get quite as cold as we could have. So that's part of the reason why climate change, yes, is still ongoing. But the other thing, too, there is research to suggest that climate change may actually be counterintuitively triggering more cold air outbreaks at the mid-levels. And here's why. It all comes down to the polar vortex, a frigid kind of whirlpool of air at the poles. There are these events that are characterized by warming up there at the poles. And the poles, of course, are warming faster than anywhere else in the world thanks to climate change. And that warmth up there displaces the cold towards the mid-latitudes. So there's a chance that because the poles are warming so fast, it may have shoved extra cold to us in North America, which may have been tied to climate change.
All right, Matthew, you made this pretty easy to understand. That's Matthew Capucci at Capital Weather Gang. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, Veganuary has officially begun. If you've never heard of it, it's a play on the words vegan and January. The climate activists who believe in a world without animal farms and slaughterhouses are inviting meat eaters to try a plant-based diet for the entire month and then decide whether to maintain the lifestyle which they say does not contribute to the decimation of forests, animal extinctions, and river and ocean pollution. But if you're someone Who said going vegan is not something you could ever do? Well, there's a film coming soon about just that.
I don't think many people grasp just how serious this is.
All we see is what the industries want us to see.
We're talking about, effectively, the collapse of Earth systems.
Hello? Hi, Mum. It's Tom. Just got a quick question for you. Why did you raise me not eating meat?
My name's Tom, and I've never eaten meat. But I can't seem to go a day without hearing from others about why they could never go vegan. Like vegans are malnourished. Climate change doesn't exist. Cheese, bacon, the food is bloody disgusting. B12, protein, animals are there for us to eat. Are these reasons justified? I need to know more.
I think there is this big misconception around you can't be vegan and strong.
What are you going to eat? You go gym, where are you going to get protein from?
I stood on the Olympic podium just 5 months shy of my 40th birthday.
I need to speak to the experts. Do you think the public have any idea what goes on in free-range farms?
In meat-eating cultures around the world, people learn to classify a small handful of animals as edible.
Issues to do with the use of other animals, the use of women's bodies.
Most people have this one-dimensional view of veganism as people who eat salads all day, which is totally wrong.
Food has now overtaken other risk factors as being the biggest thing that drives chronic disease in the Western world.
Rather than getting healthier, we're actually getting sicker.
1 in 5 people die because of an unhealthy diet.
The dairy industry has convinced us that bone health is all about calcium and calcium is all about milk.
I can't even articulate some of the things that I've seen.
When I have nightmares now, it's the sound of those pig screams that I'm hearing. The biggest cause of ecological destruction.
Humanity, technology and inventions have brought us into this situation. We can also reverse that.
Nearly 5 million deaths were caused and related to antimicrobial resistance.
This is the greatest catastrophe humanity has ever faced.
The worst experience of my life.
We'll let you know when it's released, but just how difficult is going vegan? Many meat eaters argue it's just not possible getting the nutrients you need from plants alone. But things are changing. More and more people say a plant-based diet isn't only possible, but healthier. We've got Elisa Allen, Vice President of Programs at PETA. PETA is the largest animal rights organization in the world. The acronym stands for the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Elisa joins me from London. Hi, Elisa. How's it going? It's good seeing you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My first question to you is, when and why did you become vegan?
Oh, gosh. Well, I went vegetarian as a teenager. I found out what hot dogs were made from, and I was horrified that I could be eating someone's lips or eyeballs. So that's how the journey started for me. Since then, I've come to realize that meat is not just something that you serve up on a dinner plate. It's the flesh of a once living, thinking animal who felt pain just as much as you and I do, and who went to the slaughterhouse terrified. And I didn't want to be complicit in all of that suffering. And the great news is that I didn't need to be, because vegan options abound. I've been vegan for a number of years now, but I can say that right now it has truly never been an easier time to give it a go. It's so accessible, it's so mainstream now, and everybody's coming on board.
Elisa, this question pops up a lot. Maybe you can clarify for us. What's the difference between vegetarianism and veganism?
Well, in practice, vegans also they don't eat animals, but they also don't eat eggs, dairy, honey, anything that came from an animal. Vegans also don't wear animal products, so no fur, no leather, for example. At its core, vegan means trying to harm as few animals as possible. It's really that simple, and it means believing, like PETA's motto says, that animals aren't ours to eat or to wear, to experiment on. on. And I really think that people are starting to get it. They realize that we don't need to kill to eat anymore. And it's for that reason that interest in veganism is booming. I saw stats recently that said about 8% of the population here in the UK is eating a plant-based diet. And I think that number is only going to increase drastically in the coming years.
Elisa, Peter, your organization advocates for an end what it calls speciesism, which is bigotry against animals. We've seen groups like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil do extraordinarily interesting things, for lack of a better word, to get attention, to drive, to bring more people aware of the climate crisis. Does your organization support this type of action that they generally do?
Yeah, I think their style of activism is a little bit different than the work that we do at PETA, but we always maintain that there isn't a one-size-fits-all way to approach advocacy or activism. The planet is burning, animals are dying by the billions for a fleeting moment of taste, and so we really applaud anyone who draws attention to these issues using peaceful means and who starts a conversation, who gets people talking about the urgent need to adopt a more sustainable, more humane lifestyle. I also want to mention speciesism, since you brought it up, and I think that's probably a new term or new concept for a lot of people. It's this misguided belief that some species are more important than others, and that's really something that we want to challenge, because right now we're living in a world where lots of people, they love their dogs, but they think nothing of eating a pig, for example. And so we want to encourage people to really think about the fact that it doesn't matter if it's a dog or a hog, if the animal has 2 legs or 4 legs, feathers or fins. They all deserve respect and they all deserve consideration.
All right, Elisa Allen at PETA, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as the month progresses, we'll be sharing some tips and tricks to help you through Veganuary. Here's a bit of advice from someone who gets his muscle from plant protein, despite many dissenters saying that it's not possible.
Here is a look at what I eat in a day. The only thing that's missing here is my morning smoothie, which I will get into in just a second, but really, this is it. And just to give you context, for me, my maintenance calories are anywhere from like 2,500 calories to 3,000 calories. So I do eat quite a lot, but I also have quite a bit of muscle on my body, which then raises your basal metabolic rate. So I need more calories to sustain this muscle mass. So these are the 4 main components of my second and third meal. What I like to do is keep them in their own separate Tupperwares. You could, if you wanted to, just divide them into like 2 or 3 different Tupperwares that had all the different ingredients, but I like to keep them separated just because I don't really like all the different food touching in the Tupperware for too long. I like to keep them in the fridge for, this will last for a couple days. I'm gonna eat this all today, and what I'll do is I'll just take it all out and then put it into a plate, and then whatever I feel like eating, I'll portion it out and then just make sure I eat this by the end of the day. And in between my meal 2 and meal 3, I will have some type of snack. Normally, I love fruit, so I just have here a banana for today, but I normally swap this out with like peaches or dragon fruit or watermelon or berries or whatever it is, just like a nice healthy snack. Look, I am not a chef. Like, I will be the first person to tell you I'm not a chef. It's pretty funny to me that so many people come to me asking me what to cook and what to eat, because I don't feel qualified whatsoever to be offering people recipes. Like, for me, a recipe is just a combination of some really basic ingredients, because I've never really been trained how to cook. So what you see here is just me learning over the years, and I'm very much a utilitarian. So if it's simple If it's less than 30 minutes for me to prepare, there's a good chance I'll make it. If it takes longer than 30 minutes, there's a good chance I won't bother, just because I don't like spending too much time in the kitchen. Props to those who love cooking. I'm much more of a person that wants to get in and get out and start eating. So the longer it takes, the more hangry I'll get.
The Pakistani city of Lahore is ranked very high among the most polluted cities in the world. It's covered in a thick smog that's caused by smoke from seasonal crop burn-off, vehicle fumes and industrial pollutants. And some residents have had enough. Every week, around 100 cyclists endure hazardous pollution levels in a campaign to get people to use their cars less or not at all. But it seems the peaceful biking rallies aren't appreciated all that much. The cyclists need a police escort to keep them safe.
The smog becomes a huge problem, especially in the mornings, because all this is pollution. This is not fog. Fog was something we used to see when we were children. This is smog. It's very bad for our health.
Another city high on the list is Iran's capital, Tehran. Look at that. Air pollution rose alarmingly during the 2022 summer period, and the problem has only worsened in winter. It's so bad, the government has closed down schools and universities. Reza Hatami sent us this report.
Rush hour traffic in the streets of Tehran. 8 million vehicles swarm the city, and the traffic police say that's 8 times its road network capacity. The energy-rich country has one of the cheapest fuel prices in the world. And although there have been improvements in the public transport system, many residents choose personal cars for daily commute. Partly blamed on U.S. sanctions, old and inefficient vehicles are driving up the pollution.
Old cars, buses and motorcycles lead to a high air pollution. Domestic migration and a rise in industries around Tehran are other reasons. All these industries use fossil fuel that emits pollutants. We need to get less dependent on fossil fuel by developing renewable power plants. We also need cleaner vehicles and motor fuels.
Hospitals say they're busier on polluted days. Poor air quality can cause or intensify respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. It can also hamper brain growth. Teenagers and children in particular are among the most vulnerable.
The children's brains develop both in size and performance. Brain cells don't divide and don't proliferate. If a brain cell dies, the damage can be irreparable. Pollution poses greater risk to children as its impact on their brains is more severe and more durable.
The government closes schools on polluted days to reduce both the health risk and the traffic congestion. Just as schools are trying to get back to normal following the COVID-19 pandemic, now air pollution is impacting education. Schools in the capital, Tehran, have been shut down for a record 2 weeks in a row this month. Officials say such emergency measures are necessary. On polluted days, classes are held virtually, and there is a downside to this. The experience from the pandemic years show online learning can cause long-term problems for students.
Online education in the past years had devastating consequences. Now we can see the problems it created in higher grade students. They haven't learned the basics well, especially in math. I think it takes them 4 to 5 years to recover. Distant education has also made the students less motivated in learning.
To make matters worse, internet disruptions in the past few months, coinciding with the protests in the country, are making online education more difficult.
It doesn't feel good. We will be away from our friends. We don't understand the lessons well. We have internet connection problems.
Sometimes all of a sudden I get disconnected. After I reconnect, I have lost important points.
Critics say closing the schools is not effective enough, as many students leave their homes for other reasons. It also creates problems for families in which both parents go to work. But the air pollution crisis is blamed for more than 4,000 premature deaths in Tehran alone. One official report also suggests it causes up to $11 billion in annual damage. To mitigate the effects, in-person education is something the government is willing to scrap. Reza Hatami, TRT World, Tehran.
Some of the African continent's largest and longest living trees are dying. And I know you think we're going to say it's because of the climate crisis. Well, yes, but only in part. Baobabs, which can live for more than 2,000 years, are a cultural symbol in Kenya. They're known there as the embuyu and commonly found in dry areas. They're able to store large volumes of water, and their fruit is considered a superfood. But because of the changing climate, subsistence farming in the country is getting harder, and people have been uprooting the trees to make room for crops.
In the old days, the baobab tree was very important culturally to us. This is not the case nowadays. It also occupies too much space in our small farms in which we plant maize and vegetables. That's why we have chopped the trees down or have planted our crops far away from where the trees are.
And finally, here are images of sarus cranes in Thailand. The species nearly disappeared from the country half a century ago and were last spotted in the wild in 1968. Their habitat has been hit hard by what environmentalists call the widespread invasion of agriculture. Well, 13 of the birds, part of a breeding program, were recently released over a reservoir in the northeast of the country. It's part of a collaborative effort between the government of Thailand, Nakhon Ratchasima Zoo and United Nations to save the birds. Until next time, bye.